Hi, welcome to Blockchain Theory 101 with me, Melanie Swan. I wrote a book about blockchain published in 2015, and I'm interested to share with you all of the critical parts that you need to learn to understand blockchain and its implications for the world right now. I'm looking forward to your joining me in this course. Blockchain technology is truly revolutionary. No other technology has the power to uplift 2 billion people out of poverty overnight with an intermediary-free international remittance market. Also, to re-engineer the only sectors that haven't been updated for the digital age yet, politics and economics. And finally, the only kind of technology that can help steward a smooth transition to humans and machines in collaboration in an automation economy. This is the important dimension of blockchain technology. What is blockchain? Blockchain is software. It's very much similar to the way that SMTP is a protocol on the internet that tells the web how to send email. Similarly, blockchain is a software protocol that tells the internet how to transfer money or assets. There is a blockchain layer, and Bitcoin is an application, just one of many cryptocurrency kinds of applications. But the underlying internet transportation instructions layer is called blockchain. And so blockchain just becomes part of the internet pipes, much like SMTP does, that just like when you are using Gmail and I'm using Outlook, we don't need to know anything other than each other's email addresses to send each other email. Similarly, I don't need to know anything other than your wallet address to send you some Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency. The blockchain software in the background on the internet knows what to do to transfer money between your wallet and my wallet. This is really a remarkable invention because unlike other kinds of files that we send on the internet, which can be copied multiple times, money is something that should not be copied multiple times, but only spent once. So this has been a long-standing problem in computing networks, namely the double spend problem. So we want to, how can we make sure that money is only spent once on the internet in a way that, for example, when I send you a Microsoft Word file or a PDF, you can make an arbitrary number of copies of that file, but with money, we only want it spent once. And so this has needed the internet plumbing of a big ledger system in the background that checks and confirms that money is transferring only once between parties and not being able to have multiple copies of it made. So the double spend problem was an important invention that different kinds of digital cash processing systems resolved, and in particular Satoshi Nakamoto in 2008 with his white paper came up with a digital cash system which is fortified by this ledger which enforces that money is only spent once. There's another problem in distributed computing networks that blockchain also solves. That's the Byzantine Generals Agreement problem, or Byzantine fault tolerance, and I'll be speaking about that in more detail in an upcoming session. Part of the bigger background of blockchain is the concept of smart networks more generally. So we could think of everything that's happened with computing networks so far as being part of one era of transferring information on the internet with simple networks. New era of transferring secure information, money, and assets via smart networks. Smart networks is loading more complexity into our internet pipes and using algorithmic methods to check and confirm the transfer of these assets across the internet. So the transfer of any kind of secure exchange between parties over the open internet pipes. How long this could take to roll out could be decades. So people are worried that they're already late to the Bitcoin blockchain party because there has been a lot of news and Bitcoin has been $2,700, $2,900 in the market, and so people are worried they already missed out. But really, this is a significant new era of the internet. And just like the information internet took 30 to 40 years to roll out, and it's still rolling out. It took 15 years alone for corporate email as the main application to be a standard thing in our lives. And similarly, the money internet, blockchain, could take 30 to 40 years or longer to fully roll out. Because it deals with money, it's more sensitive. And so the market and figure out an application, but rather it's time to learn about it and watch what's happening and maybe start to experiment a little bit. One reason we need something like blockchain is because its decentralizations are just like the cell phones of 10 or 20 years ago. So we would be expecting to reach digital wallet financial services. And some people think that, for example, financial inclusion is a basic human right. And certainly access to financial services and credit is something that really helps modernize and substantiate the ease of modern human life. So we would expect financial inclusion to be a main effort, a main benefit of blockchain technology. And the point again is just that hierarchy doesn't scale, but networks. Blockchain enables the long tail of economics, finance, and governance. So just like we saw with Amazon and eBay, any tiny market of a buyer wanting to buy a specific music title or book title could meet a seller of that title on the internet, on Amazon or eBay. Similarly, we can now rethink economics and governance in long-tail applications involving blockchain. So what this might mean is that, for example, I don't want a standard 30-year mortgage. I want a mortgage more structured in line with the events in my life. And so I could go onto an eBay of financial services and post the kind of terms for the mortgage I'm looking for and find a party willing to finance me. Again, there'll be algorithmic escrow methods to assure the certainty of the financial transaction. But the point is that financial services and governance services no longer need to be one size fits all. There can be as many different kinds of financial services as users have a demand for, and creativity in the structuring of those. Also, there no longer need to be banks or other financial services institutions in the middle as intermediaries taking a chunk of the transaction fees, but rather the network can enforce the trust and enforce the contract terms of the agreements. So this is a huge step forward in modernization in allowing long-tail economic and governance services with blockchain technologies. So now I'd like to explain the technical dimensions of how blockchain works. The interesting thing is that software wallets don't hold money, they hold keys. So what that means is that your wallet app on your phone holds the public and private keys that allow you to access your money in the sense of access direct transactions up on the internet, in the internet web-based ledger system. And so when you want to start doing something with Bitcoin, what you would do is go to the App Store and download a digital wallet. There are many different kinds of digital wallet applications, and once it's on your phone, when you initialize it, it will set up a public-private key pair. So the basic technology used is Pki Infrastructure. It's public key encryption infrastructure. And so what this means, there's a pair, a public key, a 32-character alphanumeric address that's your personal Bitcoin address, and then a corresponding private key that you don't see, that only the software plumbing of the internet sees when you're trying to submit a transaction. And so what happens is when you go to try to spend Bitcoin, you would scan the other party's address with a QR code or entering it in the 32-digit alphanumeric code and specify the amount of the transaction and submit it to send money from your wallet to somebody else's wallet. And then the internet software will confirm that you indeed have the money available in your account, in your ledger balance, and it will transfer it to the balance of the other address that you specify. So on the web, there's a giant, it's like a giant Google Doc spreadsheet that's on the web. And so I say I'm transferring $5 to you, or $5 worth of Bitcoin in the units called Satoshis. And so I would transfer them. So my wallet, there would be a transaction logged by the automated internet software, debiting my account for $5 worth of Bitcoin and crediting your account for $5 worth of Bitcoin. So it's just a giant spreadsheet on the web, or a ledger system, a register of who has what money balances. And this is really an amazing innovation in that where there's only one unified ledger on the internet. Anybody can look at it anytime. It's all public and open in terms of which wallet addresses have which balances. It's called pseudonymous in the sense that you can see that a certain wallet address, this 32 character address has this amount of Bitcoin in it, but it's unknown what personal entity this 32 character address might correspond to. So it's called pseudonymous. It's not completely anonymous, but it's also not identified that it's me, my name, with this $5 wallet balance. And so then then what happens is when you submit a transaction, it can take several minutes for the transaction to confirm as the mining block confirms that transaction. And I'll be explaining mining in more detail later. But once the transaction confirms, you can look up and see that record on the blockchain, and your wallet has been debited for that amount. So the key thing that we need to remember now in this kind of era is that for digital hygiene or digital numeracy, we need to back up our keys. So just like we back up our data, we need to back up our keys, our private keys that allow us to access our wallet balance. And this is quite difficult for us humans. We are not good about backing up any of our data. And so sometimes the wallet has a backup mechanism. And this is a new kind of thing that we need to be aware of in the digital era. So for example, when you lose your phone or drop it in the water, you may lose your private keys that allow you to access that Bitcoin. So this is something to be aware of in the era of using digital wallets. So how blockchain works is that it's a peer-to-peer distributed software system out on the internet. And there are about 7,000 machines worldwide running the whole Bitcoin node. It's called the Bitcoin D node, the Bitcoin daemon. And you yourself are welcome to run this, to participate in hosting some of the peer-to-peer infrastructure for blockchain, for Bitcoin. And you would just go to github/Bitcoin, and you can download the software to host a node and any of the software for how the whole system runs, and check it all out and create new proposals in improving the software and submit them back into the system. It's all an open peer-to-peer software kind of entity. And so these 7,000 nodes worldwide, you can check that out online. They're distributed globally. And the one issue is that to run the whole transaction ledger so far is already 100 gigabits. And so this is pretty substantial, and this starts to suggest the issue of scalability as a potential problem with blockchain. Now, what happens is there are different versions of our bridged software that carries just unspent transaction balances and active wallets and different kinds of streamlined versions of this whole 100 gigabit transaction ledger since the beginning of time. And so, for example, many phone-based applications will just carry a very simple ledger of exceptions or unspent balances to facilitate the speed of transactions. So this is very similar to when you go to buy gas and maybe you swipe your credit card at the gas station, and they don't confirm your whole identity, but they mainly confirm that this zip code goes with this card and that the card is a valid card at the moment. So there's an abbreviated file of data related to fast transaction capabilities with credit cards, and similarly with blockchain. Now, how the blockchain network works is that when all the transactions submitted, in the case of Bitcoin, every 10 minutes, those are collected into a block. And miners compete to be able to record that block. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. But how the experience to the user is that every 10 minutes, blocks are confirming. And so what that means is that one machine the winning machine from the mining effort will be able to confirm your transaction, shifting your ledger, your wallet balance to the other party's wallet, and that will be one confirm. So in 10 minutes, there'll be one machine, the first and main machine, that confirms your transaction. Now, with every subsequent 10-minute interval, or after the initial confirm, then geometrically every other of those 7,000 machines running the full Bitcoin node will reconfirm and check that transaction. And so what that means is that the validity, the trustability of the computing system goes up geometrically over time as every other machine in the whole system confirms also that transaction. So what that means practically is, if I'm just buying a cup of coffee with my Bitcoin, I don't really care. I can quickly, I'm assuming the transaction is going to confirm. I'm not worried about it. If I buy something a little bit more expensive, like a t-shirt, maybe I'd like to wait 10 minutes and make sure that the transformation confirms. If I buy something like a car, I probably want to wait an hour and make sure that numerous machines have confirmed that this transaction is valid and has gone through. And so, over time, it just expands geometrically the confirmation value of the transaction. Now, it's called a blockchain because, as I mentioned, every 10 minutes, all of the current transactions are collected into one block. And every subsequent block or batch of transactions, every last block calls the next block as the first element. So the block header of the next block will be the last part of the last block. And so that effectively chains together the ledger into blocks or batches of transactions, and then they're all out on the web in a sequential ledger, measured, time-stamped, and measurable over time. And next I will talk about mining. There's a lot of talk about Bitcoin mining, and including that many people think they may be able to make a lot of money this way, how much money the mining farms worldwide do make, and the wasteful electricity that is employed in the effort of mining. So I will explain what mining is. So mining is a software-based accounting function to record the transactions in the blockchain ledger. So what happens is the network, part of the software that runs the network, every 10 minutes or at regular intervals, the network issues a random number. This is called a nonce, N-O-N-C-E, and the nonce is a 32-digit alphanumeric code or some other kind of code with somewhat known parameters. The length, the difficulty, different aspects of the number are known, but it's essentially a random number that's generated by the software. And then every participating mining machine, which is a software-hardware combination, itself makes guesses about what this random number might be. And these mining rigs make guesses on the order of 4 billion per second. So you can run mining software on your own laptop. There's no problem with that, but it will probably never make a correct guess because it's not operating at the specialized speed of 4 billion guesses per second. Therefore there has been a specialized ASIC effort, and chip factories in China make these mining chips, and consequently most of the big mining farms are close to the ASICs factories in China, and they are huge data centers of machine after machine after machine with mining ASICs chips that just sit there and guess these nonces. And then one machine at random, also worldwide, will guess the nonce or guess closest to the nonce and be awarded the mining rewards. And so this is often called a new block is being uncovered or discovered. And there are a specific dollar amount of rewards in Bitcoin that accompany the new block. The correct guessing of the nonce and the ability to validate and record the transactions. So, and the full mining rewards are comprised partially of the new block rewards in the system and partially of transaction fees from parties submitting transactions. So the winning machine, then once it's won, will go through and confirm and validate all of the transactions in the block and not book or record any transactions that they couldn't validate. But in general, we'll book this new batch of transactions and log those to the blockchain. And then all of the other peer machines in the distributed network will subsequently also confirm and record those transactions. And so in this way, the whole distributed computing system is constantly updating its version of the database every 10 minutes for all of the new transactions. And so there's a little bit of time lag as this happens, but in general, the entire system is constantly updating for the current state, and all of the machines on the system will generally have the current state of the transaction balance. So mining is often called wasteful because indeed it does take a lot of electricity to operate these mining rigs and these data centers. However, it's much cheaper than the cost to run brick and mortar banking branches with human personnel. And the point is that the mining effort is designed to be purposefully wasteful in that you want only good players on your network. So because it's costly to make these guesses at the nonce, only good players that actually want the rewards will participate. It's not worth it to malicious players to get involved in this because they can't, unless they're really guessing and really spending the power and energy to actually guess, they won't be able to get the rewards. So it's been specifically set up, the software, in this cryptographic manner to be costly to make the guess so that only good players are on the network, and that is part of what makes the network trustworthy. Blockchain has many different kinds of risks, technical as well as regulation and economics. So let's just talk about some of those kinds of risks. The biggest risk with Bitcoin and blockchain is scalability. These software projects have gotten going, there's a lot of excitement around them, there are a lot of participants, but can they really scale into those next tiers to become larger, more mature technologies? So scalability has been an issue already for a few years. It's starting to be more and more of an issue. So one thing that's nice is because Bitcoin and these crypto projects generally are open source development projects, everybody can view the software, everybody can participate and comment and propose different kinds of ideas for improving the technical issues. And so that's nice because there is vociferous, open, public debate about the different issues. Everybody knows what's going on, everybody knows what other people might be thinking about it. And so it's good to have this very much a democracy, everything out in the open, a big debate. Bitcoin scalability in particular is a very big deal because transactions have grown from 400 transactions per block in 2014 to 2,000 transactions per block in 2017. And the current Bitcoin block size is 1 megabit. So only 1 megabit of data, all of the different header information about the wallet addresses and the amount of the transaction and a short memo field, all of this information has to be packed into a 1 megabit blockchain block size. And so there have been proposals, obviously, to expand the block size. Now, what's happening currently is that there are different proposals on the table. One that's garnering a lot of support is called SegWit, in particular SegWit 2, the second version of the SegWit proposal. SegWit stands for segregated witness, which basically refers to storing some information off the chain, and that the chain is just witnessing these transaction amounts. So the SegWit proposal generally calls for raising the block size limit from 1 megabit to 2 to 4 megabits, and with a future of extending it even more. The other main idea is called blockchain unlimited, and this would not have any block limit on the size of the blocks. And this blockchain unlimited proposal is mainly supported by the mining community, as opposed to the exchanges and other participants in the infrastructure on the SegWit 2. So this is a very interesting example. On the one hand, Bitcoin being such a global democracy is a great thing because we have this very loud debate about any issue. But on the other hand, it is a democracy in the sense that it takes forever to have a decision made, and that decision making tends to be about a power struggle as opposed to a technical solution to a straightforward problem. So right now, the miners are very much in support of one proposal. Some of the other constituencies, namely the exchanges and developers, are in support of the other proposal. And there are five main constituencies of blockchain: the developers, the miners, the exchanges, wallet companies, and merchants. And so getting these five to agree on something can be very difficult. And so this is pushing transaction times to be longer than the usual 10 minutes to confirm, and causing perhaps a slowdown in the whole operation of the Bitcoin blockchain right now. So governance as an issue of the community, self-governance of how we make changes to the blockchain's operations, is very much an issue, and one that's in current high contention. So scalability is probably the biggest problem with blockchain technology. Aside from scalability, there are other kinds of blockchain risks. So scalability is the known problem with different kinds of proposed solutions, and probably over time different kinds of solutions being implemented. One risk with scalability is that there could be a hard fork, and this means that the weight of the power could go with deciding one certain way, and in a hard fork situation, all of the wallet balances on one side of the chain would go forward, and all of the ones on the other side that didn't get included, all of the nodes that don't update their software, will not be able to participate in the going forward version of the chain. So it's just like upgrading to Windows 8, but if it's a hard fork situation, then a Windows 6, an earlier version of the software, would not be compatible with the new version. And so it's important to keep an eye on what can happen if there's a hard fork or a soft fork, which basically just means a hard fork would mean that your machine needs to update to the new software, or your coin will no longer be compatible. In a soft fork, that generally means backward compatibility as well. So after scalability, one of the next big risks is cybersecurity with blockchains. So there's a possibility of hacking these 51% attacks, but is the software hackable? So there are ongoingly high-profile attacks on the software and thefts of coin. So Mt. Gox was an exchange that got hacked, and there have been periodically there are hacks where coin is stolen. So what this means is that the basic protocol of the software has never been attacked successfully. So what happens is the software that exchanges run is not secure. And so, for example, your wallet might ask you to send through your transaction again that the first one didn't confirm, but that could be an error. It could be a DNS attack directing your transaction to another wallet in a double spend situation, sending the same amount of coin but to a different wallet. So all of the hacks so far have not been the underlying blockchain software, but they've been different ecosystem members like exchanges or wallet companies using the blockchain software. So attacks is something to watch for. The other thing that people worry about is a concentration of mining. So on one hand, Bitcoin is radically decentralized. It's a peer-to-peer global software system that can replace banks. But strangely, ironically, the Bitcoin mining operation is actually highly centralized. So there are only a few companies, 6 to 10 companies, that have the lion's share of the mining effort. And these are mostly in China and a little bit in Russia and the Nordic countries. And so the people worry about the potential risk of the mining concentration being in China. Now, over time, as Bitcoin or blockchain software becomes more adopted globally, the mining concentration could not be in just one country. It would need to be dispersed all over the world, similar to the Visa payment system, for example. So right now, it could just be temporary that it's concentrated in China. But if the mining operation expanded a lot more, it would need to be more globally dispersed. Another worry is a 51% attack. So with the software, what could happen is that if any party or parties colluding together can control 51% of the network mining power, they could theoretically take over the network. So people talk about a 51% attack. However, blockchain theorists think that this is not a particularly difficult problem or a real risk. So number one, the parties participating in blockchain currently don't have incentive to collude. They don't want to bring down the whole system. Further, even if they could take over the network in a 51% attack situation, it's only for a moment. It's not for an ongoing kind of control of the network. Further, even if taking over the network, it would not be possible to steal balances from wallets or push through different modes of how the software is going to confirm the wallet balance transfers, or really do anything on the network other than be controlling the processing power of the network for a moment. Further, this actually 51% attack greater than 51% control of the processing power of the network situations happen all the time, almost daily. And because the network is all operating together as an ecosystem, it's not a threat that is ever acted upon. And so 51% attacks are a risk, but probably not a real risk. They're more of a deterrent than an actual risk that would be acted upon. So those are the different kinds of technical risks. But then there are other kinds of risks. One is perception risk. This is becoming less of a big deal now, in that formerly, meaning a few months ago or a year ago, people thought, oh, Bitcoin, blockchain, that's for Silk Road or just for illegal activities. But just like the regular internet, certainly there are illegal activities and legal activities, and now the amount of activity, the volume of transactions coming from bona fide sources, not for illegal purposes, far outweighs the illegal purposes. So perception risk is perhaps not really a risk. Then the third big category of risk is regulation risk. So this is a possibility that different state governments outlaw Bitcoin or regulate it. Bitcoin or blockchain technologies require licensing. For example, in New York City, there was the Bit license, which effectively squelched the Bitcoin startup development industry for at least a year. And exchanges, for example, China's exchanges implemented a new kind of rule earlier this year, and volume effectively dropped to zero after that. So regulatory risk continues to be a big problem, and something to certainly watch for with Bitcoin and blockchain. Initial crowdfundings. So initial coin offerings or crowdfundings is a new kind of financing source that has come up with blockchain and Bitcoin crypto investments. So crowdfunding is essentially now an SEC allowed, completely valid method of fundraising. It's basically like Kickstarter, but it's a valid form of financing. And so it's like Kickstarter for crypto projects. Crowdfundings is the ability to advertise your project on the internet and have investment from any kind of investor, not just institutional or accredited investors. So initial coin offerings are a huge way of making money for projects currently. Now there are benefits for both you, the project, and you, the investor. So the benefit of raising money in an initial coin offering is that you give away coin, you don't give away equity. And that allows you as an investor to realize liquidity immediately, as opposed to having to wait for lockup periods that are traditional with private equity investments in IPOs. So initial coin offerings are really a new kind of funding. They are extremely popular. Some recent fundings raised $35 million in under 30 seconds. This was a project called BATS, for example, in New York, which focused on attention. It's an advertising, real-time bidding advertising market kind of play, not even financial services, but advertising for tracking attention on websites. And so initial coin offerings are really the way that any kind of crypto project is raising money for its funding right now, and it's extremely popular and extremely liquid. There are several websites that you can look for market information about crowdfundings going on, which ones will be coming up, some market analysis as to the quality of them. And I would expect that there would be securities analysis kinds of operations, like we start to see in S&P or Moody's rating firms, some sort of analog to that cropping up to support some sort of quality rating and analysis of initial coin offerings. Because right now it's you have no, unless you're familiar with the project personally, you don't have any idea about the quality of the project. So initial coin offerings, or crowdfunding, is an extremely important new method of financing for crypto projects. So let's talk about Bitcoin versus other kinds of payment networks. So Bitcoin is in a lot of ways a better version of PayPal, a bigger and better version of PayPal. But what about Bitcoin compared to something like Visa, the biggest payment network in the world? Well, right now, Bitcoin is processing on the order of 7 transactions per second, as compared with Visa, which typically processes about 2,000 transactions per second. So 7 versus 2,000. So Visa is the bogey. Visa is what to target. So Bitcoin, if it really wanted to arrive and be adopted on a wide scale worldwide, would need to be processing much closer to the Visa kind of industrial processing of 2,000 transactions per second. On the other hand, we can also talk about the total amount of money processed via these two services, and Visa is processing 18 billion a day, and Bitcoin is processing 300 million per day. So that is clearly 300 million of Bitcoin and 18 billion of Visa transactions is quite different. However, processing $300 million of transactions per day is pretty remarkable for the Bitcoin software that has come out of the woodwork in the last several years. So it's not too shabby. The other thing to talk about is the size of the overall Bitcoin market cap. So right now, its market cap has been on the order of $41 billion. And so that compares, say, with S&P 500's market cap of $19 trillion. So again, 41 billion compared to 19 trillion is a tiny drop in the bucket. But on the other hand, $41 billion of market cap is actually the size of 100th smallest country. So Bitcoin is already really quite a robust, global, liquid economy that bears keeping an eye on. But that just gives us an idea of the relative size of Bitcoin relative to Visa and the S&P 500, that Bitcoin is processing 7 transactions per second versus Visa's 2,000 per second. Bitcoin has $300 million worth of transactions per day versus Visa's 18 billion, and Bitcoin is on the order of a $41 billion market cap as compared with the $19 trillion market cap of the S&P 500. applications. A blockchain, Bitcoin sounds wonderful, but what about specific applications in specific industries? Well, Bitcoin or blockchain is first and foremost a form of digital payment system. So immediate cash transfer across networks, across borders and boundaries is the first, but the future could be having one unified industry ledger, one database where all of the securities are logged, and therefore securities could be transferred instantaneously, not in the current market of T+1 or T+7, several days to transfer and settle securities. This could reduce the cost and the risk of holding securities over time as they clear in a buy and sell transaction. So unified ledger systems are a very large application of blockchain in the financial services industry that several companies are involved in implementing in different large financial markets in the world. This could be very important as there are numerous steps in the value chain of buying and selling a security in regard to custody, insurance, titling, payment transfer. There are numerous steps, and all of that transaction fee could be effectively squeezed to something close to zero if the transactions were to occur on a blockchain. This starts to get at the bigger idea of using blockchains as a digital registry for all kinds of assets. So this could include auto titles, home and land titles, building, securities, any kind of assets that we have in the world could be logged and registered to blockchains and then transferred this way. And that could be instantaneous and also over time with smart contracts. So the farther future, one of the reasons that blockchain is so revolutionary for economics is that every form of asset could be registered digitally on a blockchain. Another thing that this could include is different kinds of work permit, different kinds of accreditation like diplomas or certifications in regard to work skills, professional skills, and education. So we could have giant logs of everything online. Another important application of this would be in the medical industry. For example, a registry of all controlled substances of drugs. The industries starting to implement blockchain applications right now are supply chain and logistics, financial services, supply chain and logistics, healthcare, energy, Internet of Things, and fleet management. And these are some of the biggest application areas for blockchain right now. So the kinds of financial instruments that can be booked to blockchains include stocks and bonds, options, treasury securities, annuities, insurance products. Any kind of financial security could happen with this is that blockchains are, once you get an asset cryptographically managed, mortgages, adjustable rate mortgages have interest rate resets and other parameters per market conditions in the future. And so instead of having humans book the new interest rate, or the automation mechanism that currently happens, this could all be by blockchain. So when that adjustable rate mortgage has an interest rate reset at year 10 and checks every month for the current LIBOR or other interest rate mechanism, this could all be done by smart contract, and the entire mortgage industry could just be deployed via smart contracts on the internet. A smart contract is a contract that is registered to a blockchain and executes code as stipulated per the blockchain. So a contract is still an agreement, a legal agreement between, and that's what a smart contract is. One of the reasons I think blockchain is so exciting is because it's for remaking economics and finance and also governance. So we have never thought about, we're usually born into one country, into one economic and governance system, one political system, and we don't really think about the possibility of there being anything else. And so with blockchain, once we can start to register all of our assets to blockchains and transfer them that way without traditional intermediaries like securities firms, We can similarly, in the governance sector, start to register all of our legal documents to blockchains and possibly transfer them without the laborious bureaucratic efforts of government processes. And so I will now talk about some of the different applications in the governance sector. So one of the first and most obvious applications of blockchains in government is for registries. So this can be land and title, building registries, housing permits, auto registrations, driving permits. And so, for example, some states have out CFPs now for vendors to implement blockchain registration systems for a land registry or auto registries on the blockchain. It takes a while and involves a number of steps and a costly effort with local authorities. And similarly, a house is much more complicated with different steps of insurance and validations and title research and checking that the selling party is actually entitled to sell that asset. But instead, if houses are booked, registered to blockchains as assets, the title could be transferred essentially instantaneously, as well as in the securities example. And so this could eliminate the expensive fees, 6% paid in the case of a house sale transaction. So any kind of, just like any kind of financial assets might be registered into the blockchain, similarly, any kind of government titling systems might be also registered to blockchains. So that would be any kind of asset. Then any kind of identity-related document as well. So this could be licenses, driver's licenses, marriage licenses, birth and death certificates, and any kind of visas and work permits, as well as any kinds of certifications for diplomas or licensing for, say, the CPA exam, for example. All of these accreditations and statuses accorded to individuals could also all be booked to blockchains. And so you could easily look up, instead of having to send schools your transcript, this could all be performed with a simple blockchain lookup. Did this person attend this school? Or likewise, confirming when you're hiring somebody new that they have gone to school at and worked at the places they list on their resume. That could all be a simple smart contract automated process conducted by a blockchain rather than by a person actually confirming that with other people. So any kind of documents related to identity can be booked to blockchains. So after titling registries, identity documents, the next big governance kind of application would be other kinds of things related to capability, like a passport or a visa system. And so this could be truly a transnational system where instead of having one particular government issued passport, there could be a global kind of confirmation of identity. And this is very important in situations such as refugee situations across borders and in war-torn areas. So I recently worked on a project for the UN where they need to have some kind of refugee identity system that is valid in situations when the person has nothing on them. And so we worked out an identity confirmation system with 3 different levels. So the first level would be if somebody has a smartphone and their e-wallet app that has their identity as part of it, or even an SMS capability on a flip phone to confirm an identity with a passphrase or something like that. So the first level would be there's some sort of technology, telephone technology available. Second level would be perhaps the person has been issued some kind of token they can wear as a ring or a pendant, or have a piece of paper with them with a QR code to scan and have some kind of confirmation of identity. And that could even be on a tattoo on the body. And then the third level would be the person has nothing, but perhaps with a biometric scan of a fingerprint, iris, and facial recognition scan, or perhaps a person remembers a passphrase to access their digital wallet that confirms their identity. So there are many kinds of situations where we want to confirm identity or transfer funds where people may not have access to a digital e-wallet on a smartphone or a cell phone at all. So some of these humanitarian applications are very important as a governance application area of blockchain as well. Some of the other long-tail personalized governance applications concern voting, different kinds of voting systems that are controlled and validated as to who's participating and audited via blockchains. Some of these that are discussed are, for example, quadratic voting. This is a part of quadratic voting is part of a cumulative voting kind of concept where the problem targeted is the tyranny of the majority. So what happens now is every person gets one vote, and so the majority view squeezes out any minority view. And so this has been a long-standing problem in democracies about how to deal with the tyranny of the majority. A proposal to counter that is called cumulative voting, where, say, every person gets 20 total points, and you can accord them to whichever issue you care about the most. And so quadratic voting is quadratic squared. Similarly, so you could allot any one person could allot as many as 4 of their points towards any one particular issue, and then not voting more than 20 total points. So these kinds of distributed point systems could be enacted versus in blockchains in an efficient way for one of the first times that this could actually be possible. And the argument is that we might get a more representative voting system of people who really care about certain issues, as opposed to the very monochromatic one vote, one person, one vote. Other kinds of voting systems include delegative democracy. So anybody could delegate their vote to another voting party. Again, it would be very easy to enforce this with blockchains if I wanted to delegate my vote to somebody who knows about a particular issue. And another kind of voting would be random sample elections, where different persons, sort of like balloting, but different random persons are selected as a sample on certain issues. And also PageRank voting. So this is a system similar to Google PageRank, which tries to obtain the relevance or saliency of certain issues. And so again, certain people could be polled based on the relevance or salience of issues. So blockchains basically provide a secure method of implementing or testing some of these more sophisticated voting systems that we haven't had a chance to try, because in a monolithic one person, one vote system, they're not really possible. The other thing I want to talk about is legal contracts. And so this is very important anytime we have a contract or a document like a patent registration or intellectual property, or a will, or any kind of legal document. One thing we always need to do is file it and register it, and the other thing we always need to do is attestation. So confirm that that is the last and original version of that document, that there have not been changes to that document. And so one thing that blockchain is great for is confirming the proof of existence of a certain document in a certain way at a certain time and day. And so this is a technique called proof of existence, and this applies to any digital asset, any digital file. Could be an artwork, like a GIF file of original artwork, or a legal document like a will in a Word document or PDF. And so what you would do is run a hashing algorithm over whatever your file is, and that'll pop out with a unique 32 to 64 digit code that corresponds to the exact contents of that document at that particular time. And then you register that code to a blockchain, and you get a time date stamp. So that was this day at this time, and that can be relevant for patent registrations or other IP, or will registrations or contracts, or any kind of legal document always refers to the date and time it was recorded. And then later, say somebody passes away, then you want to confirm the contents. That was the last will and testament, and the file contents haven't changed. And so you simply run the same hashing algorithm over the document. If you get the same 32 to 64 digit code, you know that the contents have not changed. And the benefit is, yes, we register the 32 to 64 digit code on the blockchain that can be visible by everybody, but the contents of that will, of that file, are not known. Only that later we can know if the contents had changed or not. And so this is a very important functionality called proof of existence that could completely reconfigure the legal industry, as every legal document is hashed and posted to the blockchain with a confirmable proof of existence code. So how do we actually move our own operation onto a blockchain? Well, the idea would be to do a process mapping in your organization of every different kind of process that goes on, and the key moments where there's a transfer of information or money or assets between parties. And any kind of transfer point, a coupling point between two parties on a network, is a potential moment for blockchain logging and automation. And so if we think very broadly about the kinds of things we do in business or in government, there are two levels. And one is activities that require a human decision to be made. And the other level is just mere execution tasks that, once decided upon, can just be implemented. And this is a huge category of activity that can be just automatically executed once it's been decided about implementing it. And so the first sort would be mapping processes and identifying network coupling points where information or money is transferred, and separating out the human decision-making part from the automated execution part. And that is the basic roadmap for how to implement blockchain technology to improve your business. There are two kinds of ways to think about blockchain leadership strategies. And one is that blockchains are by nature an EDI, a VPN, a way of connecting other parties in your supply chain, in your industry. And so one way of showing leadership would be to start or join the blockchain consortium in your industry, in energy trading, in real estate document management, in whatever your industry is. And so there are probably starting to be specific industry applications for your industry, and the leadership edge can be in maintaining and joining a blockchain consortium. The second kind of thing you might consider is offering client-facing blockchain applications. So thinking about the different kinds of operations involving information and money securely transferred with your clients, where a blockchain might be a way to automate and have a better way of doing what you're already doing. And so, for example, commercial banks are thinking about exactly this. How can I reach a whole new tier of customers with an electronic e-wallet banking application on a blockchain that I'm not able to address right now with my bank branches? And then the third kind of thing that you might consider with blockchains is internal cost savings and risk reduction. So in the internal functions of quality assurance, audit, all kinds of accounting approval processes, say sales quoting, RFPs, RFCs, all of these kinds of operations internally might be logged to a blockchain and better coordinated for risk and cost reduction. So these three kinds of things: joining an industry consortium, offering blockchain applications to your clients, and managing costs and risks internally with blockchain software might be ways that are specific for you to start implementing blockchain technology today. The biggest blockchain projects right now are Bitcoin and Ethereum. So what's the difference between them? Well, Bitcoin is the original biggest market of a cryptocurrency. It's mostly for immediate cash transfers of monetary value, a digital payment system. There is some smart contract functionality built into Bitcoin in that you can mark certain transactions for some kind of future execution, but it's really for transferring a cash transaction right now. Ethereum, on the other hand, is more like a virtual computer and is more for smart contracts, for future transactions, for setting up some kind of agreement about some kind of transfer of information or asset in the future. And so Bitcoin is for current immediate cash transfer, and Ethereum is for longer term future execution of something more complex. And so the real future could be in smart contracts, because most of the time any kind of complex transaction has future temporality, concerns over time where we want to specify certain conditions for what might happen per different kinds of conditions changing. And so smart contracts would really be where we set up the future. Now, there are different kinds of views about legally what is a smart contract, because do we need a different kind of legal regime to support code-based contracts as opposed to our more malleable human legal regime, where in real life, in fact, many contracts are never, the provisions of many contracts are never enforced, and our human behavior is a little messy and fungible and fuzzy when it comes to the actual specifics of complying with different regulations in the law or in contracts we've agreed to. But code-based contracts, on the other hand, will execute inexorably, unstoppably. Once it's booked to a blockchain, it's a computing entity, and it will execute per those conditions. And so a code-based contract is like a vending machine in a way. If the vending machine is not broken, every time I put in money and select my item, I get my item. It doesn't decide that it doesn't feel well one day and decide, oh, I don't want to deliver the item that day. As opposed to our human life, in biology, we're much more malleable and don't always perform like a machine. And so the different legal regimes, it's nice to think of smart contracts automating a lot of our human efforts. But on the other hand, are we ready for code that just executes inexorably without taking into account a change in conditions? And so one topic at legal conferences looking at smart contracts, for example, is how smart contracts can be modified, since they are by definition not modifiable. So how can we how should we regulate these code-based entities versus our more flexible human legal-based system is an issue that comes up when we start to think of more complicated applications using Ethereum and other smart contract platforms. Bitcoin and blockchain are a distributed computing solution. In the world of distributed computing, there are many nodes out on an open network transferring traffic. And so two of the important technical problems are, first of all, the double spend problem. Namely, with money, we don't want multiple copies of it made. We want to make sure it's only spent once. And so that's how the mining operation controls fault tolerance. And so this gets its name from, in Byzantium, when there would be very large battles and you would have a number of your Byzantine generals out on the war field, but you don't know if they're defecting, if they're colluding behind your back, if they're staying a healthy bona fide node fighting for your side, or if they've joined the other side or defected or become wounded. And so the issue is we don't know the status of nodes distributed out on our network. So how can we protect our network when we have these nodes and we don't know what's really happening with them? So that's what Byzantine fault tolerance is, namely, can we identify and enforce good network players on our network? And so there are a number of solutions to this. So the first, namely proof of work and proof of sale, and then maybe prediction markets and maybe self-mining networks. So the big ones are proof of work and proof of stake. So proof of work is the consensus algorithm. So the consensus means how do we come to a new truth state of affairs in our network and update all nodes. And so a blockchain is a state change machine. It maintains a state, i.e. this state of the ledger balances, until something happens, and then that truth state needs to be updated to the new truth state. I bought a cup of coffee, so my wallet balance is lower and the vendor's is higher. That's a new truth state of the network, and that information needs to be propagated and updated by all nodes. So the mechanism for updating the truth state of the network is called consensus. So consensus algorithms are what updates the truth state. And so consensus algorithms, the first one is called proof of work. And this is the mechanism for consensus used by the Bitcoin network. And so the proof of work is exactly this mining process of making the investment to guess at that random number, the nonce, 4 billion times per second, and investing that energy, a proof of work, performing the chip performs computational tasks in order to guess at that random number. And so it's conducting a proof of work to obtain the rewards, to convince the network software that it's a bona fide player, it is earnest, it means well, it is honestly trying to guess the number and reap the rewards for that work. It's providing a proof of work. And so that's the consensus algorithm by which the Bitcoin blockchain runs. The other big kind of consensus algorithm is called proof of stake. So instead of providing proof of work, a computation to guess the rewards for this transaction, a proof of stake is more like a voting system. So a proof of stake in the system. And so these systems typically have different entities called validators. Any network participant might be a validator, a transaction validator, and might post some of their stake in that network coin as a bond in escrow on the network as a convincing mechanism that it is ready to make good faith decisions about the quality of validating the transactions posted. Algorithms is that they're fairly convoluted. Right now there are several different ones under proposal, for example from Ethereum, who is having a blend of a proof of work and a proof of stake consensus algorithm for booking transactions to the Ethereum network. There is also another method called Polkadot, another one proposed by Tendermint and Cosmos, and another one proposed by Dfinity. So these projects all have different modes, and Stellar is also a version of this. These kinds of proof of stake methods all have some sort of structure of network voters or validators that put a proof of coin down as a deposit for, say, at least 30 days in order to participate in validating network transactions. And there are typically multiple rounds of voting as to the quality of the proposed transactions. And so the network truth state can update only if there's a quorum or a 2/3 majority of validators supporting the new state of the network truth. My own view is that these methods are very convoluted right now, and they also depend on human intervention to a degree that may seem untrustable to new network participants. And so I think that over time, the proof of stake method might have to become more streamlined in order to be more adopted. So that's proof of work, proof of stake. There's also prediction markets, which is basically outsourcing the truth state of the network to other guessers from the outside. And so other parties can review and guess at the accuracy of the transactions to be booked to the network. So prediction markets is another open, straightforward mechanism by which truth states of the network could be arrived at. And rewards can also accrue to those that are performing the accounting operation of validating and booking new transactions to the ledger. And then a fourth method, I think, is self-mined networks. So this is a new kind of idea where algorithmic participants, not human participants in the network, could mine for each other. So any area, any sub-area of a network needs to have its transactions booked and confirmed, and we could maintain independence by having one area mined for another area. And so maybe Canada mines the transactions for Iceland or something, and vice versa. So you could have a peer-to-peer based system of contributing work that is independent from your own effort, but yet is an efficient way to participate in the network. Because the problem is that proof of work is expensive, but it's a very nice cryptographic algorithm that works very well, but it's perhaps not scalable to other applications outside of finance, such as energy, Internet of Things, and healthcare, where because we're not transferring money as much, we don't need such a heavy cryptographic architecture to support the validity of the transactions. So we need something a little bit cheaper and more scalable than proof of work. Proof of scale seems to be too complex right now. Prediction markets are not going to be liquid enough for all of the different kinds of industry chains that we're going to need. So I believe we need some kind of algorithmic, self-mining, intelligent smart networks that do perform independent mining operations for each other. Another example of this could be in the smart home controlled over an IoT network, where, say, the kitchen sensors mine for the bathroom sensors. So in other words, kitchen sensors are completely different from the bathroom sensors, but they merely look, validate, and confirm and book the transactions from another part of the diverse operation. And so I think self-mining networks in the future will be another mode by which we might enforce consensus, come to consensus and truth states on our smart networks. Using it for personal benefit now. What about if you want to get involved in buying and selling some Bitcoin now? What's the best way to do that? So there are a number of different things you can do. Downloading a digital e-wallet is a good first step and a good way to have a wallet into which you can receive Bitcoin. You can fill your wallet from your bank or different kinds of exchanges currently, or from your friend. So maybe your friend is going to transmit some Bitcoin to you. And then from your digital wallet, you can purchase items via Bitcoin in person at a vendor point of sale by scanning your QR code and transferring Bitcoin, or on the internet by using your address to purchase something with Bitcoin. So one of the benefits of this is, for example, consider making a purchase with Overlook. For the payment information, you don't need to supply your personal financial data. And so already that's safer for you and safer for the store. They don't need to worry about protecting this honeypot database that can be hacked with their customers' credit card information. And the Bitcoin transfer is immediate. So it's safer and cheaper for you as a consumer, as well as safer for vendors. So you might consider using Bitcoin to purchase items like that. Bitcoin is very volatile. It's been at $2,700, $2,900 lately. It was at $800 for a year or more over a year ago. So the currency is very volatile and subject to investor interest and speculation. And so if you're an individual, certainly if you're speculating, it can be an interesting security to invest in for speculation purposes. It can, but it's not safe but it's a very high risk kind of security. And if you're a vendor, what if you're a vendor and you would like to accept Bitcoin as payment? And what about the volatility? So what happens is that when you sign up with a payment merchant like BitPay, every time that you receive a transaction in Bitcoin, it's automatically converted to the fiat currency. So there's not a very high risk of loss from currency conversion due to the volatility of the investment. Also, some of the funds by which you might, presumably there will be more kinds of ETF or securities that are actually Bitcoin pegged in the future. There aren't a lot of options for this yet, but in these kinds of investment vehicles, one idea is a kind of an averaging. So the investor is not exposed to risk, but rather all the time there's a balancing between the fiat currency and the Bitcoin to try to solve for the volatility of the Bitcoin price. Another possibility is investing your IRA in Bitcoin. There's a company that offers that as an option currently. And right now is a good time to explore and conduct a few transactions with Bitcoin, but certainly in most people's case, not time to invest a lot into it because it's a new vehicle and it's high risk. Also, the tax consequences are something to check based on whatever state and country you're in. Some regimes tax Bitcoin transactions as a currency, others as a security, and there are different regulations unfolding on different time frames in different tax regimes. So that's another element to be aware of when you're considering personal exposure to Bitcoin. But it's definitely a modern thing to start to get to be familiar with, to get a digital wallet and start conducting a few transactions. Thank you for joining this course, Blockchain Theory 101. We've covered some of the technical aspects of what blockchain is and how it works, applications in different industry areas, future class applications, consensus algorithms, other kinds of technical aspects like mining and problems like scalability, and future possibilities. I appreciate your joining and thank you again.